Welcome to the second quick start video. Let's go over what we've done thus far. We've come up with a topic. We've come up with several thoughts related to that topic. We've put those thoughts into a logical sequence and hierarchy such that we have an outline from which we then wrote sentences related to those thoughts. Each one of the laws has then two sentences, so we added some extra thoughts in there. And we also wrote the introduction and the conclusion sentences. Given that this is a simple subject, we could go ahead and publish this paragraph. It really is ready for that. But since what you'll be facing is likely something where you're chewing through a problem, where you're trying to research something new, I'm going to give you some techniques you can use to chew through that, to review that, to look over what you have and see if there's anything you can add, anything missing, anything that could flow better, those sorts of things. There are three techniques that you can use to do that I'm aware of. You may come up with other ones, but this is just to give you some ideas. The first thing you can do is take each of these sentences, in this case we have 8 sentences, and put them into a numbered list. So we have the introduction sentence, the 6 body sentences, and the conclusion sentence. You may even want to label them. If it helps, that's fine. Put the introduction for the introduction sentence and body for the bodies and conclusion for the conclusion. The purpose of doing this, as opposed to leaving it in paragraph form, is that you can rearrange the sentences easily. You can splice them, split them up, combine them together in various ways. You can add in thoughts more easily when it's in a numbered list like this, as opposed to when it's in a paragraph form. The other thing you can do at this point is you can read aloud what you've written. What that does is it helps show you gaps in what you've written. If you've at this point been reading things silently, you may have had some gaps that your mind has filled in, but those are gaps that your reader will not fill in. They will notice the gaps, and you don't want that. So you read it aloud to see if those gaps are there. So for instance, what we would do is we'd look over these sentences, and since these are numbered, first law, second law, and so forth, they're pretty obviously in the right order. But you may end up with something that is not numbered, and you may have to look at this and see, is this really in the right order? This is kind of a double check, because you have gone through this already in the outline. This helps you to double check it. Then you'll go through and read it aloud. The core of classical mechanics, which describes the interaction between objects, is governed by Newton's 3 laws of motion. The first law of motion states that, and so forth. I'm not going to read the whole thing for you since you've read it already a few times, but that's the technique that you would go through when you're trying. That's the technique you'd go through at this stage when you have it in a numbered list. One thing I'd like to caution you about is that it may seem repetitive and boring and even unnecessary to go through the same thoughts over and over again like we're doing for this paragraph. Well, that may be the case for something this simple, that's easy to understand and easy to write about. But a lot of times I'm guessing that you will be writing on something more complex. And in that case, you need something to help you through that problem and to solve that problem. These techniques will help you to chew over the problem, they'll help you to solve the problem, they'll help guide your research, they will open your eyes to things you've overlooked, and they will give you a more polished final product. And a polished final product is a lot more convincing to the reader than something that you've slapped together at the last minute. It will also give you a greater familiarity with the subject so that you're able to answer questions without having to refer back to your writings. Let's get into the second technique. For this technique, you're going to take the sentences and put them back into paragraph form, and in this case, you're going to add the implied questions back in. So it'll look like what we have here on the screen, where we have the first sentence, the body sentences, the conclusion, and with the implied questions in between. Now, what is the point of doing it this way? Well, the point of doing it this way is to ask a lot of questions and see if there's anything you can add to this. So, for example, you may remember we had that first sentence, the core of classical mechanics, and so forth. You can see it up there. And the first question I asked was, what are these 3 laws? Well, that question has 3 answers, and yet I only gave one of the answers, because this is a good point for you to know. You only need to answer one to have a logical continuity. Only one of the, or give one of the answers, Or if there's more than one question, answer one of the questions that have logical continuity. Now, one of the answers may be better than one of the others. For instance, I could have said the third law of motion and started with that instead of the first law, but that would not have made sense. The thing is, with this paragraph, they actually numbered the laws, and so you know which one's the first law. What you're doing, you may not have a numbered list, and so you may have to figure out which one comes first. Not who's on first, but which one comes first. The other thing is that you can go through and think of as many questions as possible related to each sentence, and you could actually turn a paragraph like this into a whole paper. Let me show you. So we have the first sentence, the core of classical mechanics, which describes the interaction between objects, is governed by Newton's 3 laws of motion. So of course we have the question, what are these 3 laws? But you could also come up with, who is Newton? When did he live? What significance is there to these laws? Did Newton discover these by himself? Was there anyone else who was working on this at the time? Was there anyone working with him? As you can see, you can come up with enough questions where you could write a whole nother paragraph or a whole nother section of a paper based off of just one sentence that you started with and by asking questions. Now, I find that I give some of the more interesting dialogues, you might say, or monologues even, when people ask me a question and then I answer that. I find it's easier to ask a question, answer it, and be interesting, hopefully, than it is to just start rambling on about something. So a lot of times when we think of writing, we think of someone just giving the answers or giving the information. But by asking the question, answering it to me can give you a more lively paper. The final technique is to put together your final paragraph. So you'll have all your sentences in order in paragraph form, remove all the implied questions, and do one final check on this. Go through and check for punctuation, check for wordsmithing, just see if there's anything missing. You may want to read it aloud again just to make sure that it sounds good, and just do some final checks on that. Finally, we're done with that paragraph. You don't ever have to look at that paragraph again. But now it's your turn. You now know how to write a coherent paragraph, and hopefully a compelling paragraph. What I want you to do for your paper is to put together, come up with a topic for the paper, the overall topic, see if you can come up with several subtopics, and see if you can turn those, go through this process and turn those into paragraphs. Put those paragraphs together in your paper, and you should have a reasonably readable paper. I hope these videos helped you, but I want to caution you that there's more to writing than what I covered in these 2 videos, and so my hope is at some point you will check out the full course on this website. In this course, I'll show you how to move beyond the single paragraph, and I'll show you how to write a paper on any scale, whether it's the 1-page memo or the 200-page dissertation.